What's up guys, welcome to the channel. My name is Victoria and for today's video we'll be making a straight palazzo pants. So let's get started. So first we begin by drawing a horizontal line from the top edge of our pattern paper, and that line will serve as our waistline. So this trouser will have a band of 1.5 inches. So I'm going to be taking note of that 1.5 inches when I start taking all my vertical measurements. So let's begin by marking my hip line at 9 inches. As you can see, I'm taking note of the 1.5 inches for the band. So I'm just going to mark 9 inches before going in with my ruler to draw the hip line. And after doing this, the next measurement I'm going to be taking will be my crotch depth. And to determine your crotch depth, you have to be in a seated position and then take the measurement from your waist to where your bum touches the seat. Just the way it is shown in this picture, and mine is 12 inches, so I just marked that. Then I'm going to be marking my knee line at 22 inches. So from my waist to my knee line, that's what I'm just marking right now. And finally, I'll be marking the full length of the trouser. So my trouser length is supposed to be 42 inches, but unfortunately this pattern paper is too short. So I'm just going to mark it at 39 and then extend it when I cut it out on the fabric. So still taking note of the 1.5 inch for the band, I just marked 39 inches and I'm going ahead to draw a horizontal line across that mark. So right now I'm just going to indicate that the full length stops at 39 inches so that I'll remember when I'm cutting it out on the fabric. So at this point we are done with all our vertical measurements. And now it's time to insert our horizontal measurements divided by 4. So I'm going to begin with my hip measurement. And I'll be marking that measurement on the crotch line, not the hip line. So I'm just going to mark my hip measurement divided by 4 on the crotch line, and then I'm going to square it out to the waistline. So I'm just taking that measurement and marking it on the waistline before going in with my ruler to connect both points. Then I'm going to go out by 2.5 on the crotch line, and that will become my crotch extension. Now for someone who is slimmer, you can take 2 inches for your crotch extension, but I found out that when I take 2 inches, it is always a little tight, so I'm going to be using 2.5 for my crotch extension. So after marking my crotch extension at 2.5, I'm going to go over to the hip line and mark 1/4 inch. This is just going to direct my French curve to give a perfect curve for the crotch. So I'm just going to go in with my French curve and blend both points to the main line like so. You can see the crotch curve is wide enough, and that's just what I want. And now it's time to work on the waist. So again, I'm going to take my waist measurement divided by 4. So I'm just going to mark that, and then I'm going to mark an extra inch for the dart. So I'm just marking my waist measurement plus 1 inch allowance for the dart. Then I'm going to connect that point to the hip line. So I'm just going in with my ruler to connect it to the hip line before working on the knee line. So on the knee line, I'm going to go in by 1.5 inches and connect it to the crotch line. I hope you understand this. First, I connected the waistline to the hip line, and now I'm connecting the knee line to the crotch line like so. So as you can see, our trouser is gradually taking shape. And now I'm just going to connect the knee line straight down to the full length of the trouser. So on the full length, I'm going in again by 1.5 and then I'm going to connect both points. Now at this point you can always alter the shape of your pants. You can make the leg narrower or wider. So back to the knee line, I'm going to mark my round knee measurement divided by 2, and when I measured it, it gave me 19. So I'm just going to divide that by 2 and mark it on the knee line. And I'm taking this measurement after the 1.5 inch I came in by. So right now I'm just going to connect the knee line to the crotch line. And also connect it straight down to the full length. And to make sure it's straight, I'm going to take the measurement I have on the knee line and place it on the full length of the trouser, and I'm going to mark that before connecting both points. So after connecting these two, I went ahead to mark my center front and the number of pieces I'll be needing to cut out with this pattern. Right now it's time to work on the dart. So I'm just going to take my bust span measurement, that's my nipple to nipple measurement, divided by 2, and then I'm going to add half an inch allowance, and mine gave me 4 plus half an inch, that's 4.5. So I'm just going to mark that, and I want the length of the dart to be 4.5 as well, so I'm going to mark that before going in with my ruler to connect both points in a straight line. And then on the waist, I'm going to mark half an inch on both sides of the line, and then I'm going to connect all 3 points in a triangle. Unfortunately, my camera stopped recording for some reason, but don't worry, you didn't miss much. I just connected the 3 points like I said I would. I connected 3 points together, and this is what it looks like. Still on the waistline, we're going to go down from the center front by half an inch, and then we're going to go up from the side by half an inch as well. So that's what I'm doing right now. Then we're going to connect both points to meet the first dart leg. So first I'm just connecting the side together, and then I'm going to connect both points to meet the dart. So first I'll connect the center front to the dart, then I'll connect the side front to the dart as well. And after doing that, that will be all for the front block. Before cutting out the front pattern, I just placed a fresh pattern paper underneath this front block, and I'm just going to transfer all my important points to this new pattern. So I'm just transferring my waistline, my hip line, my crotch line, my knee line, and the full length before going ahead to draw out all the horizontal line. So I've gone ahead to draw out all the lines, and I'm just indicating what each line stands for. So before inserting my horizontal measurements, I'm just going to go in by 2.5 inches from the side. This will make room for the extra allowance I'll be adding to the back pattern. So after marking 2.5 all the way to the end, I'm just going to draw a straight line across that point. And then starting from that 2.5 inches, I'm going to replicate the front pattern to the back pattern. So after doing that, this is what it looks like. So I just marked the same measurements I had on the front pattern to this back pattern, except for the waist manipulation. So now that we have a guide, it's time to create the back pattern. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to come in by 1 inch from the center back on the crotch line, and then we're going to come in by 2 inches from the center back on the waistline. Now for a slimmer person, you can come in by 1.5 inches, but for me, I'll be coming in by 2 inches. So after doing that, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to connect these 2 points in a slant. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to create a new crotch extension for the back. And this line has now become our new center back. To create the back, crotch extension, I'm going to be dividing my hip measurement by 10. So my hip measurement is 42 divided by 10, that's 4.2 inches, and I'm going to mark it along the crotch line from the new center back. So from the center back, I'm just marking 4.2. And like we did for the front crotch extension, I'm going to go out by 1/4 inch on the hip line from the center back. Then I'm going to connect those 2 points to the main line with my French curve. And that will become our back crotch extension. Now it's time to work on the back waistline, and the first thing we're supposed to do is we're supposed to come up from the center back by 2 inches, but I didn't give enough allowance, so I had to take down an extra pattern paper along the waist. So please make sure to leave enough allowance along the waist when cutting the back pattern. So like I said, from the center back I'm going up by 2 inches. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my waist measurement plus the 1 inch allowance I gave for the dart. That is my waist measurement divided by 4 plus 1 inch allowance for the dart. And then I'm going to place the measurement in a slant to meet the waistline. So please pay close attention to what I'm doing right now. So from the center back extension, I'm going to place the measurement to meet the waistline. Then I'm going to come up from the waistline by 1/4 inch before connecting it to the extended center back. So first I'm just making sure the measurement is correct, then I'm going to connect both points in a slant. So right now I'm just indicating my center back and the number of pieces I'm going to be cutting out for this pattern before going ahead to insert my horizontal measurements. So first I marked my hip measurement divided by 4, and then I'm going to connect it to the new waistline. I marked the hip measurement from the new center back towards the side, and then I'm just going to connect it to the new waistline before connecting it straight down to meet the crotch line. So right now I'm just indicating the waistline for the back before going ahead to work on the knee line. So to create the back knee line, I'm going to come out by 1 inch from the front knee line along the side, then I'm going to connect it to the crotch line. And along the center, I'll be going out by 1.5 inches from the front knee line to create enough room for my bum. Then I'm going to connect that point to the back crotch extension. And what's left to do now is to connect the knee line to the trouser length. So I'm just going to do the same thing I did on the knee line to the full length before connecting both points in a straight line. So at this point, make sure to insert your back dart. I forgot to do this even though I did it afterwards off camera, but at this point before you cut it out, make sure to insert your back dart from the center back along the back waistline, just like we did for the front. So I used the same dart length for the back as I did for the front. So that being said, I'm just cutting out the back pattern. It's easy for me to cut out since I used a different color of marker for the back pattern. So right now I'm just cutting out the front pattern. So I'm done cutting and I'm just indicating the front, and I also indicated the back. And now that we have both patterns ready, it's time to cut it out on the fabric. So I've gone ahead to cut the pattern out on the fabric, and remember we didn't add any allowance to this pattern, so I added the allowance I needed when cutting it out on the fabric. So I added 1/2 inch allowance along the waistline, 1 inch allowance along the side and the center front, and then I increased the full length to 42 inches plus 1 inch allowance for hemming. And I did the same thing for the back pattern, 1/2 inch allowance for the waistline, 1 inch allowance along the center front and the side, and then an extra 4 inch allowance for the length. I also cut out 2 pieces for each of these patterns. That's a total of 4 pieces together. And now it's time to assemble our pieces. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sew from the waistline to the crotch extension along a 1 inch seam allowance. I'll do this for the front and the back as well. So after stitching it down, this is what it looks like. I've also gone ahead to iron open the seams, and I've done the same thing for the. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to place the front to the back, right sides facing each other, and then I'm going to match the seams along the crotch extension. So I'm just going to open up the seams for the back and the front and make sure they are aligned perfectly. And then I'm going to pin it down and sew from one end to another along a 1 inch seam allowance. So right now I'm just adding a few more pins to prevent the fabric from moving around. And after stitching it together, this is what it looks like. You can see that seam is perfectly aligned, and that's just what I wanted. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sew the darts for the front and for the back. So after sewing in the darts for the front and the back, this is what we have. And now it's time to sew along the side seams. So we're going to be sewing down the sides along a 1 inch seam allowance. But then there's going to be a zipper along one side, so I'm just going to make room for that. So I'm just marking where I want my zipper to stop, and I'm going to be using 7 inches. So the zipper is going to stop at 7 inches. So on this side, I'm going to start stitching down the side away from the 7 inches all the way down, and on the other side I'm just going to stitch the entire side seam close. So I've gone ahead to stitch down the side seams right side facing each other, and when I flipped it, this is what it looks like. But before I attach the zipper to these trousers, I'm going to first of all hem the foot of the trouser. So I'm going to roll the hem inwards twice and then sew very close to the edge, and I'll do the same for the other foot. So after hemming and giving it a good press, this is what it looks like. So I decided that I don't want any button on this trouser, so first of all I'm going to attach the band before attaching the zip. So for the band, I cut out a piece of fabric 4 inches wide and 36 inches long, and I just lined it with some interfacing and folded it in two. And after giving it a good press, it's time to attach the band to the trouser along the waistline. So first I'm going to fold the band inwards by 1/2 inch on both sides, then I'm going to sandwich the trouser in between. So like I said, I folded the band inwards on both sides by 1/2 inch, and I'm just placing the waistline of the trouser in between the band, and then I'm going to sew very close to the edge from one end of the waist to another. At this point, you have to be very patient in order to have a nice finishing. So just take your time and keep going until you reach the very end. So after stitching the band to the waistline, this is what it looks like. You can see it's very neat on the inside and also on the outside. So it's time to attach the zipper, and I'll be using a 1-inch seam allowance. So guys, the zipper has been attached and our pants are ready. I'm extremely excited about the outcome of this pant. It is my first time making palazzo pants and it was pretty easy after drafting the pattern, and I absolutely loved wearing this. It was very free and easy to move in. If you use this pattern to create yours, please share with me on Instagram. And if you have any questions about this tutorial, just leave it in the comment section and I'll be happy to respond to all your questions. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you would like to see more videos like this, please subscribe to the channel and I'll see you in my next video.